Salve,
Hello, welcome here. This year, end of June, we have screened La Strada in Piazza da Maggiore, that was introduced by Gianfranco Angelucci. And then there was also Francesca Fabri Fellini. And it was a moment that really was unforgettable. For many, it was the first time that they would see La Strada. The conditions were strange because the evening was cold, but it was as if we were all hugging one another to warm up and to be lightened up by the film. And at the very end, the spectator told me, well, I have like fainted, and I woke up crying. And the introduction of Gianfranco, as usual, and because I heard him introducing films of Fellini, well, his introductions are always unique. This year, we wanted to remember Giulietta Masina at the Cinema Ritrovato, and we wanted to do it with Gianfranco because he has extended and re-edited the volume on the book on Giulietta Masina, this actress, this woman that is really unique and extraordinary. And I want to thank Gianfranco for being here and for his work, because to some extent he has brought her back to life. He has brought Giulietta back to life, literally. And then I apologize because I have to go. But I'm happy that this conversation is animated by Roberto Chiesi, who knows very well and so profoundly Italian cinema, and in particular Federico Fellini.
Gianfranco perché Federico lo ha
Because Federico has met him, has known him, has studied his work. And they are both people who keep on living with Federico and through Federico. Well, did you meet him? A little bit. I cannot think of my life without Federico's films. Well, I have been struck by him and by his films. Thank you for being here and remembering Giulietta. You know, she was Bologna, actually from San Giorgio di Piano, and she was the only actress who played in the two films that were Academy Awards and that were struck by the light of Federico Fellini, that were the moon of Federico Fellini and the sun. It is important. Her role next to Federico was unreplaceable. She was an actress that could not be just limited to the holy image in incense cloud. She was a real woman, and we want to talk about this, not rhetorically. I am grateful to Gianluca Farinelli for inviting me here in Bologna, not only because I always have the impression of getting into the magical walls of rain. You know, the atmosphere here does not exist elsewhere in Italy nor elsewhere in the world. But here things are authentic, because if Farinelli invites you, it's because he wants you to be a witness and to be the testimony for the subject he has picked, and he wants it to be familiar to everyone, as well as object of reflections and considerations and thinking. I don't want to be too serious for a subject that is lightweight. Well, I don't want to make a preface on Giulietta, but because I'm unstoppable. Gianluca knows this. But maybe you can proceed with questions by yourselves with your questions. And Gianfranco, I would like to start by asking you what you think of a sentence that Fellini said on his professional relationship, artistic relationship with Giulietta Masini. He said, and referring only to the La Strada, the Nights of Cabiria, and Giulietta degli Spiriti, excluding Ginger and Fred. And he said, these three films, well, I have made these despite her. What did he actually mean, this despite her? First of all, he wanted to make us laugh. He wanted to be a clown. Well, there was a polemic on the film La Strada between Federico and Giulietta because not a malignant one, of a woman who thought legitimately to be very feminine as well as seductive, and she wanted to be the protagonist of Away with the Wind. And companion would have been Clark Gable. But at the same time, in the moment in which he had married her, and his friend Riccardo Gelink and asked him, how did you manage to fall in love with her, this creature that's so far away? And he simply answered, because she makes me laugh very much. And he gave us a reading key because he had seen in Giulietta, and he had identified the clown soul she had, that for Fellini was the heraldic noble sign of aristocracy. That is, the actor is born as a clown. An actor is born to make children laugh. Comic actors are benefactors of humanity. And he saw in Giulietta the mimetic capabilities and skills. She had a choreographic skill as a dancer, even serving a dish to the table with a dance step. Her movements were graceful and fascinated Federico. Also the playing times and timings that Federico recognized in Giulietta. Well, she had a nature that was a little classified sexually, which is not flattering for a woman, but Giulietta feeling already from her body, in the moment in which Federico transforms her into Gelsomina, and she gives an interview, and I was there in Milano. She told me she was no longer there. He put a chalk on my head, ashes, and put a piece of
Prima guerra mondiale così dura che
a cape on my shoulders, and I had the sign of the cape around my neck for hours later. So he had transformed her into a being that she could not recognize herself as. And she recognized it only when the film was completed and she had been revealed. Bear in mind that Giulietta, as an actress, had a peculiarity. She did not want any hairdresser or makeup artist to touch her hair. She could be under makeup work for 4 or 5 hours, but no one could touch her hair. And the first thing that her husband would do when she went on stage, she would touch her hair a little bit when they were fluffy and high. And so he would put her hands on her head. And this was a move as a ritual of a wizard that would help transform her into something else. And these two actions are the things that distinguish the relationship of Federico and Giulietta as the same actor. And when Ginger and Fred, Federico gives her the role as a ballerina, as a dancer that she had dreamt of all her life. And the number of Tip Tap with Marcello Mastroianni was prepared for the role for hours and hours on end. And she had dislocated her ankle, but she didn't ask for any stop of the film, and the insurance that covers all the expenses for such an accident. The mentality of the true actor. The show must go on. The show must go on, and she wanted to play, could keep on playing, you know, anti-pain drugs without for her to complain about anything. But at the very end, when she got close to her husband, she asked him, could you have me play in this film 20 years ago? This was their relationship. And I told you about the hair, her hair, because we will not come back to this subject anymore. But at the end, when Federico fell ill, and she had fallen ill herself without knowing what she had, but she came to see Federico that was admitted in a hospital in Ferrara, and I was with her, and she had come with a turban on her head. Well, Federico did not say a word. He did not ask anything. He started as paralytic as she was, because his body was working only half, and he started calling everyone in the car, afraid to pick him up in Ferrara, because he wanted to go and see Giulietta. The doctor of the San Giorgio clinic who was taking care of him, of course, was scared, because he had organized a car with a neurologist in order to follow him up. So Federico went to Rome, and he went to the clinic, to the private hospital Columbus, and he slept all night long with Giulietta, because he understood from that turban that she had a lung cancer, and she was completely, she had lost her hair completely. And she was bald. And when we talk about cinema, we talk about what they have done in the cinema in a lifetime that is intertwined completely. With Federico, you could not touch Giulietta. Nobody could touch Giulietta. He could touch her, and it was the only one. When the cell phones were not there, he would call her constantly. Wherever he would be, he would call her from any place he would be, and be in touch with her. What are you doing? Where are you? How are you? Their relationship was incredibly united, inseparable, and linked by a secret that nobody knew, and at a certain point came about, and maybe I managed to tell this secret in my book, and was not liked by the family of Giulietta Masina, who tends to give you only the hedonistic aspect, only the positive symbology aspect of the character, without knowing that the magnitude of the character lies also in the shades and gives the humanity. And what brings me in this edition, I wanted to tell all about Giulietta Masina, and it's a narration telling with a great testimony of telling of Giulietta when she says that she was going to her sister in Rome and it was raining, and she lived near in Flaminio, and Via Flaminia at that time was a street where many prostitutes were there, and she would light up fires. And she would pass by, and she was recognized, and they recognized her. The prostitutes of Via Familia recognized her and called her, Cabiria, Cabiria, come over here, stay with us. And she was a little puzzled and confused, and then she had gone next to them, and they went around her. And they went around her and started talking to her, and they called her Cabiria, like the character of the film in which they identified themselves, because she had interpreted one of them. And they would tell them their stories. You know, this happened, the same thing to me. And another one told her, Cabiria, you saved my life. So she kneeled down and she kissed her hand. And Giulietta said, literally, I didn't know what she was doing. I didn't know what that lady was doing. But I knew that she was giving my life back to me. And when some of them told him, "Oh, Kabir, people are getting close to us. Go away." I apologize for my being moved. It's my age that makes me cry. I apologize, but every time I'm in this. To get out of this situation, I remember the line of Ettore Scola, because everybody was flying, Scalfari, Napolitano were crying, and he would say, don't worry that at my age we also cry for a cutlet that is well cooked. Well, I cry also for cutlet myself. And Giulietta said, when they would say, go away, that people are coming, and who knows what they're thinking. I said, well, I couldn't care less of what people were thinking. I was with them, and I was one of them. Giulietta was of the sign of the Pisces, an astrological sign that is called clashed, one against the other. So two natures that are constantly being in a dialectic position. She was a magic person. She had suffered a lot and translated her sufferings into light. And she lived next to Federico with very many problems you can imagine, because Federico was a person that was out of the chorus, not only in terms of he was a genius. He was, as if we wanted to judge Leonardo or Michelangelo, you cannot do it. You just look at his work. You're not interested in the rest. But Federico loved women, loved life, had a huge capacity of seduction for all the people he would meet, and he was living in a context of temptations that were huge. I don't want to make any gossip about being close to him and being one of his confidants. I had received a not rarely request by young girls who would ask me when they were asking to be able to have a night with Federico, because they were genius. In fact, one of these girls obtained a role in a film.
in una semplicità totale.
And Federico was a simple person, but he was an emperor as well. I saw Spielberg kneel down in front of him when he came to Cinecittà in Rome, and he had just completed Duel. Not to talk about Martin Scorsese, what he would say about Federico. Federico, in the years the 70s and 80s up to the 90s, was like the Pope in Rome. You know, they would come and visit the Pope, the Colosseum, and then Cinecittà to meet Federico, aristocrats, officials, and the directors of film libraries, and the artists, whoever would come and find and see Federico for his blessing, because he had changed the cinema, had made a dimension that that nobody else had made before. He was a director. He was director and author of an unparalleled cinema. He was the one who would direct the actors on stage. Suddenly, Federico changes everything, cinema, the language, and he makes this film that is called La Dolce Vita, that has no more plot, and he proceeds by sequences that are one next to the other, and one gives the meaning to the other according to the association, and includes in the film the psychoanalysis, the dream, the interpretation of the dream, the confusion, and the idea that the individual is not lucid, is not brilliant, but confused, and in the confusion can tell the confusion of all of us. And if he tells about this confusion, he saves us all. So it's a matter of redemption. With Giulietta, the redemption becomes a film that is called La Strada. And what I have seen, it was on July 5, 1,500 people in the Piazza Maggiore to view the Strada, a film of 70 years ago. And a guy said that he had fainted and then he had resuscitated. I've seen it so many things. I was invited in an asylum of Cercola near Naples, where La Strada was being used for individuals that were strongly depressed, and the therapist had received incredible results of restoring that I have assessed myself. Also in the States, they use this film in some asylums, because La Strada has within a meaning that many of us have looked for, and we have analyzed and tried to detect through the plot of the film, but actually remained as an enigma, remains, because the film tells of a story that Federico told, a terrible,
Storia di una ragazzina.
ferocious fairy tale, and it's about a young girl that is taken by San Panò,
Individuo
jester of the road, a type that is that is violent, that goes and takes this young girl, and he buys her for 10,000 lira, a bottle of wine, a piece of bread, and he buys her and takes her away, because she's going to be his assistant for whatever he needs, and she has to leave her home. Yeah, so she has to leave herself, the mother, the sisters, the only reality that she knows, like a little dog living on the beach. She is taken from her neck with her neck, and she is put on this truck and taken away. Go on the strada and look at the moment in which she has to leave her family. And she has a long sequence of her face, and look at her. because you will have the face that she is 3, 4 years of age. She is a little child and has fallen into the situation of a creature that is a child that is taken away. She doesn't know where, how, whether she's ever going to come back, and who she's with. Because why this film? Why for this film? Why? Because Federico is born in neorealism with Rossellini, and she is the scriptwriter of Roma Città Aperta, and also Paesà, that is even more important from a language point of view. And he absorbs the philosophy of Rossellini of direct take film, and Federico did not have to start with White Shake and Paesà. Where did La Strada come from? Why a guy of 27, 20 years of age invents the La Strada, the story of this creature divided between two men, between Zampano, who is brutal, and the crazy Richard Basard, with the angelic figure, the figure who listens, the other part of the male that becomes your adventure companion and does not contrast you. And when Giulietta would say, be careful, all the characters are Federico, and she was right, because Federico was putting on stage a theater of the unconscious, where nobody knew where their roots were, but that we have discovered afterwards. When did we discover this? And then I give the floor to you, because I'm going to leave the floor when he died. One of the lady with whom he had a relation for years, Anna Giovannini, that I went to see her also after his death, suddenly one afternoon revealed something that I'd never heard of before. And she said, do you know that Giulietta was a natural daughter, and the father had conceived her with the maid of the house. Well, I never had this suspicion. Didn't Federico tell you anything about this? Well, it's this way, and this is why the mother gave her away. And suddenly my brain opened up. I called up Tullio Kezic, and I asked him, did you know this? And so La Strada is exactly this one. Giulietta is given away at 3 years of age for the first time to the aunt who lives in Rome, whose name was Giulia Sarti. She was filthy rich. She was the heir of the calzaturificio Varese, and had married the brother of the mother, Eugenio Pasqualini, who was teaching, and he had become a dean. They had no...
Giulietta.
Were fond of Giulietta, and the parents had given her away. And she was in a rich family, and she could have had many, many opportunities. And San Giorgio di Piano, she could not enjoy something like that. But imagine, if you think of yourselves when your mother would leave your hand, or half an hour at a friend's, you thought that the world was collapsing on your head. Imagine the little child that leaves everything, the family in San Giorgio del Piano. She had 3 brothers, and then brother and sisters, siblings. The odors of the house, the maid, and the soup, and the odors, and suddenly your identity is no longer there. You go into a city that you don't know. You go with people that love you, but they're not your parents. You have to live a life, and you don't know what's going to be when you're going to come back. Well, it's a laceration. It's a wound that is open in a child, and that is La Strada. This is what Federico understood. Federico was a sponge, not only a medium, but he was a person that knew and lived his relationship with the people, absorbing everything. So many malignancies that were said about Federico was also this. Ennio Fagliano would say, I was the Coca-Cola can he would put in his
Però Federico si appropriava di tutto quello che
his straw, and he would absorb everything. And he would absorb everything around, and he would convert it all, and he would transfigure it. And with Giulietta, this was the relationship. And in La Strada, this creature that is torn away from her security and safety features to go into the world with a brutal man, and the angel figure that come in to clash, and the brutal and vicious man kills the angel when he crushes his head on the car, and he says, you broke my watch, and then he falls and dies. And Gelsomina is there and says, the crazy man is there, and he's sick.
con Zampanò, che l'ha abbandonato.
Fool is there, and she says, he is feeling sick, and then he leaves her in the snow in the hills and covers them in the snow, and leaves her there under the cover, and goes away, and abandons her there, and like a coward. And then he lives in this village with the dunes on the beach, and sees the lady who is hanging the garments, and he hears this lady crying, singing this song, because this was the song that Gelsomina had learned. And she said, I learned it from a young girl that was hungry, that we gave her a dish, some soup, and when there was some sun, she would take a trumpet, and she would sing this, play this theme. Zampanò does not say anything, and he repeats the number, and then in the circus, and then at night he is at the beach under the stars that goes into the water, and comes out back and sees all the stars, and kneels on his knees and starts crying, and Zampanò starts crying heavily, because as Giulietta had found her soul through the fool, and Zampanò finds his soul because Gelsomina has given this as a gift, knows he has a spirituality, and he knows he will live somewhere else. And one evening when Federico was willing to say some intimate things, and he said what he represented. He told me it was the story of an enlightenment, of the conscience opening through the sacrifice of another creature. And it reminds us of something, of the gospel, of that when he was when the priest, and he was in the hospital in Ferrara, and he wanted him to answer some questions, because despite his condition of complete disability, he wanted us to continue working together. And among these questions of this questionnaire by the priest, there was a question that was like delirium, like this priest was asking whether Federico noticed that in the Catholic religion there was so much irony, and he, who always brought down everything as to the basics. It was no rhetoric. It was a game to explain things. Had lifted his eyes, and he says, "How can we speak of irony in a religion that has as a representative that?"
A Bacchetto in romano è il culto.
Abbacchio, that is the young roasted goat, lamb, that roasted lamb. I did not understand the Catholic religion when he mentioned that small roasted lamb as a symbol. The Agnus Dei is Giulietta, is Gelsomina. It's the one that will take away the sin of the world and gives you the possibility of thinking that you are that being as the one that created you. Go back and see La Strada and see the story, and you see that the route or the itinerary of Gelsomino up to her end and the redemption of Gianfranco, and you see what this film is really telling you. Not a joke of neorealism as Aristarchus wanted to try and interpret. He was telling something that had never been told anywhere else, neither in the cinema nor in holy text. And he would say, and he would tell it as a layman, as a person that was truly attached to his faith, that was the one of the artists that nobody could touch upon, as nobody could touch Gelsomina or Cabiria. In fact, if we go back to the question, if it's true that Gelsomina had not been the most beloved interpretation by Giulietta, well, Cabiria was loved because in Cabiria there was actually what Giulietta wanted to do in life. That every time you fall down, you get up again, and this referred to women. Every time someone is abusing of you, you should know that you're going to make it, even if you're being killed, even if it happens even too frequently in the world. The woman is the creation, is the one who gives life. Without women, we wouldn't be here talking about Federico or nobody else. The woman is life. It's the image and the creation, and that's untouchable. Yesterday, we witnessed in Piazza Maggiore to this marvelous the silent film that is called Eroticon, accompanied by live music, in which they speak about women. The woman before it was preceded by catwalk and défilé of fashion dresses of the 20s, these beautiful women with fantastic dresses of golden brocades and Chinese silk and luxurious models. The car that comes and picks her up, the appointment with a pilot, wonderful women that are underlying the basin of the emotion of men, and the pilot says, if you come with me, the angels will be envious, but the woman that doesn't have civil rights, it's the woman that does not vote. and the woman cannot decide upon its fate and the fate of society where she lives. What is this contrast? When in 1965 Federico will shoot Giulietta degli Spiriti by giving the unconscious to the consciousness to the wife in the press conference, he said this sentence: no man will be free until the last woman will be free. In 1965, nobody knew what feminism was.
Parlare.
This is what we should talk about, and I'll stop here. Otherwise, our friend Chiesa would say that mine is a monologue. But bear with me, because it happens to me all the time. Be patient with an old man, as I said before. No, absolutely. We are enthralled because we're here to talk about Giulietta through your book and your words. In your book, you say at a given time, and you describe a unique phenomenon which was unique to Giulietta Masina. Something that was physical and also inner feeling. She has musical traits, innate, and so she moved and following a music, an interior music, with a grace, with a delicacy of steps and gesture. But that was the way she moved in her everyday life. And how can you tell us about this trait of Giulietta? Where did this trait come from? Well, perhaps she said that her father played violin, so the father wanted to be a violin player, but considering that he had a large family, and so he went to work in a factory, Montecatini. She adored, worshipped her father, this musician father. But I would like to underline that the father was a violin player, so the Fool, played by Richard Basehart, is a fiddler playing violin, and it is not by chance that Gelsomina falls in love with the fiddler. And so I make a jump, and going back to the traits of Giulietta, this is not by chance. The story, the plot of the film, the story inside the film moves out, overflows out of the film. And Giulietta and Basehart fall in love, really. Richard Basehart is the husband of Valentina Cortese at the time, and also Federico seemed to have had a flirt with Valentina Cortese, and he fell passionately in love with Giulietta, and Giulietta adored him, worshipped him. So she was not a saint. She was a woman with her feelings, her passions, her craving for love, and also the fact that she loved her husband, but her husband was not faithful. So when she fell in love with Federico, and he said, her friends at school said, but you always said that you love blonde, little angel men. And she said, well, I see Federico as a blonde man, as an angel. So think about that. So she fell head over heels with Richard Basehart. And so then what happens in the next film by Fellini, Il Bidone, and they are cast again together. She's a husband and wife. She's Irish, and Richard Basehart is Picasso. Besides being a frauder, he's also a painter. So that he has all this side trade. And so they are married, and they go to a party by Riccardo, a fraudulent man, and so you can see the scene of the dancing. They dancing together, one in the arms of the other, and she is a sparkling light, a sparkling star. And this is what happens when a woman falls in love. She's wearing a dark dress, very skin tight, and she looks like Brigitte Bardot. And it's incredible how people change when they fall in love. And in order to follow her dick, she went to act in a movie that was distributed with the title "The Woman of the Other." She went to Germany with the Finnish filmmakers. And she really believed in that character, that person that's very fragile. He would die in a mental hospital in the U.S. Because he was a drunkard, and so he. So Federico, who was able, who spoke a lot and was a communicator, when the press revealed the scandal and they were insisting on that triangle, he called a press conference in Venice, coming with Valentina Cortese, Giulietta, and Richard Basar all together, and all the journalists were hassling them, and they wanted to talk about that. He said, here it is.
E la storia si scioglie e probabilmente si scioglie.
The cheater. Here it is, the cheater. Here we have the cheater. And everything stops. At that time, the story or the love story of Giulietta and Richard Basar disappear and stops. The cheater. But Giulietta moves again with dancing steps, and she brings back her talent on the screen, but she says that this comes from her father. And she has this, if she felt or heard a rhythm, a music, if we work on the set, on a theater, we come to an initial moment, the day when a young girl in Greece, by listening to the sound of cymbals of this flute, or like a syringe, you will see it many times painted in Greek vases, the laulos, so two pipes, flute. And so maybe the young girl made the first steps, and by moving her gracious arms to design arabesques in the air around the altar of Dionysus. Dionysus is the god of happiness, of party, of getting drunk, of drunkenness. Bacchus in Roman time, the Bacchanalia. When we say that there's a lot of noise, we call it Baccano. He was the one discovering the life liquid, drink, the wine. When we lose our limbs and we lose the control of our limbs and our heads and our gestures, and then we start to know the other feature of human nature, that is to say the subconscious, and this Dionysus is this god of subconscious, and his counterpart is Apollos. And then from there we see pantomime, we see the theater, the mask, the stage, and also cinema. If we move in cinema, and in cinema you move according to a rhythm in a choreography. You don't see it, but all the actors move on the set. There is a timing in cinema, and we owe it to this original feature, making it possible to be on stage. And there is always a woman getting the start of everything. Giulietta was invited to go to Spain. Tullio Casic accompanied her for a promotional tour, and he said that she danced flamenco without having learned how to dance it. So naturally, by just listening and following music, and she was admired by people in Spanish, and she had this very talent. And when Federico talks about Giulietta in the book Making a Movie, Fare un film, he said that he admired the most the timing of Giulietta, as every filmmaker would do. When you direct someone, if you do not have the timing, then you cannot, it goes counter to what you're doing with the camera. Last Friday, I ended shooting the 10th episodes on the trades of cinema through the work of Fellini and his statement. This is a plunging into the artistic world of Federico Fellini.
Coreografia.
The episodes on choreography, well, I focused it only on Giulietta. So just to show that there are no movies in which Giulietta acted that there is no dance. Starting from Luci del Varietà, which Federico directed with La Tuada and two other directors. She plays the role of Melina Amour, and she dances on the stage. And from then on, every film where Giulietta is, you will find a dance number. And then up to the last one, Ginger and Fred, where finally, at last, in a sort of parody of Ginger Roger and Fred Astaire, she can perform as a dancer, and she really shows her talent. I think that the time allotted to us has come to a close. We thank you, Gianfranco Angelucci, for your splendid book and for your presence here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Vorrei rispondere alle vostre domande.
I would like to answer to your questions if you have a few minutes. Otherwise, so what can we say? So do we have a few minutes to go? If there are questions, obviously.
C'è una domanda,
Grazie. No, volevo
Thank you. I just wanted to say something about the fact that Federico and Giulietta could not, had a child who died very young. So he died at birth. I would like us to tell us something about this tragedy, this absence of a child that somewhat kept them together. I don't know if I've understood your question. Small Federico, that's the name. Federicino. Federicino died 28 days after birth. He died because he had pneumonia, bipolar pneumonia, probably following a fact that it had a lack of immune system. So for her it was a tragedy. She had 2 miscarriages before, and also because she really wanted to have a child. And even Federico wanted to become a father, but he really He looked at children with appreciation, with love. He was very kind and gentle with children. Giulietta said, consider we didn't have children, why don't we adopt a child? Let's make us a colored family with many colors. And then Giulietta would say, well, I would have to deal with them all the time. And we are always away shooting films. But there was this feature. I didn't talk about that. Perhaps there is a sort of restraint. There is something that I don't know. That is a bit mysterious. I don't want to talk about it. It's their own things. And digging into that doesn't help us to understand the rest. The one essential thing is that this wound for Giulietta, having lost to the possibility of having children, she could not have children anymore, was a terrible thing. And she was sick for many years after that. She was rescued thanks to antibiotics and penicillin at the time. She was saved, her life was saved, but she was wounded even more deeply. And she really followed her nieces and nephews, her sister's children. Giulietta was so generous, and she wanted to give to everyone. And I think that she could have become a very nice mother. She was authoritative, but very sweet. She was really wide-eyed, and she probably would have been a real mother. And as I say, a couple, a childless couple remaining together has one reason to be together, and they don't use the children as an alibi, so they're linked by a love tie that is stronger. Well, Giulietta gave it for granted. Federico had another outlook. So he was saying that this is our fate in our life. If God did not want me to have children, then perhaps God wants me to be a director fully, to give myself to the film direction and not to disperse my life. We don't know the reason of pain. So pain helps us to grow in life. So they were somewhat lucky to find a great link between each other. There were books. You probably read the book by Marina Cerato. Marina really tells the stories in details, the rows, the conflicts quite strongly, quite violently. By painting a Giulietta that was really wounded, very aggressive against Federico. I cannot say so. I know that Giulietta, this is no secret, unfortunately, getting old, she drank a lot, and this was dangerous. She needed to lose her senses somewhat, to blunt her feelings with alcohol. Actors are so anxious that what really struck me in life is to see Vittorio Gassman, who is a god in cinema or TV actors, looking for the pain in physical pain by putting his lit cigarettes, quenching them on the palm of his hand in order to really feel the physical pain. Otherwise, he could not get on the stage. I remember when I worked with him on the special on Casanova. Federico was on the set. When I worked at the Quirino Theatre with with Gassman. I said, Chuck, take. After 5 minutes, he started talking, and I became audience. And when he finished, I felt this hand, Federico, hand on my head, and he said, Jeff, you have to stop. He called me Jeff. I forgot that I was the director then, but he was a great actor that forcing to, that Pagnani would drink, Rina Pagnani would drink all the time. She was drunk all the time. And so we think that actors are so strong, instead when they step on the stage, your ghost. And really, well, so there was an interview on Federico, and you will see it. Rubini, really beautiful. Rubini gave me that on this feature of the actor. And so actors, and we write, and we have an open page, a white page, a white canvas. The photographer has the frame. Certainly, the white page of actors was when you step into the stage. What can I say? Up till after tomorrow, but I know this is not possible.
Ultima domanda, sono felicissimo.
Mille grazie perché...
Thank you very much, because listening to you and also your story is fantastic. You're so precise in your details. So when you started talking about the male prevalent traits, you focus on 2 features, but you didn't mention the third. When you talk the violent, the fool, I didn't understand the third one. So in reality, the 3 characters are a single character. So Gelsomina, the fool, and the violent. Okay, so the question was, in the last few times of his life, he was a bit confused. He had lost his way. I understand your question. I mentioned Giulietta's sentence. So what was this relationship between them? Giulietta initially, and Federico said, initially Giulietta is always against. I have to do something up to the point when I realize that I had to follow her resistance and turn it into a movie. She was always against. Giulietta said, I never understood Giulietta degli Spiriti. I understood it 20 years later. But when I was shooting it, I didn't understand it, she said. So then she said the same thing on La Strada. Be careful, because the 3 characters are always Federico, Zampano, the fool, and Gelsomina are the same character. And so, and she's telling you that I was passing through, which is not true. Because if you see La Strada, you see exactly that Giulietta is Giulietta, and she is doing something. Because this happened many, many times because he was a medium, and often actors would come out staggering because he would really put them in a trance. And while he directed them, he was he was putting them into a trance. He was hypnotizing them. There was a beautiful interview of Leda Lo Iodice interpreting the mechanical doll in Casanova, and she says incredible things. She says, while I was doing acting, Federico was telling me point by point, do this, do that, cry, move your hand, and then says at the end. And there is also this feature of this being sincere that have come across Federico. I say things openly. At one point, doesn't speak about herself as Leda, but as a mechanical doll, and she speaks as Leda. and she was, on top of Donald Sutherland. And at the end, when we finished, we had to somewhat go and take a cold shower because we were both very excited physically. And then say, "Are you sure? Later, should we keep that or should I cut it?" No, put it on. And then she was thinking, and she said again, at that time we had an orgasm together, and I think that he didn't want that, because this is a stupid thing. She doesn't know what Donald Sutherland was thinking. But for a dancer, acting in a role, and then she lives this sexual involvement to the point of accepting that she really had an orgasm. And we are very grateful to her by saying that she didn't realize that it's Federico that was driving her in that direction. In this, Giulietta moves back. Of course, they are both, three of them. She says the same thing, that Federico was gelsomina. Federico was that absolute innocence. In his genius, in his malignness, he was innocent. I prefer to believe at everything than believing in nothing. That's what he said. I cannot have defenses, otherwise I wouldn't be an artist. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to do what God asks me to do for you. Were I to create diaphragms, obstacles, walls, I prefer to believe everything instead of not believing on anything. So in Cabiria, there was a character that could not be identified. Every day he sent her anonymous letters, and they said, Federico, the next day he had sex with this woman, with that other woman, etc. And she was really torn apart. You cannot breathe. I don't know what to do. So he went to a magician, a seer, Magda Radin. She was really a very powerful seer, using their hands. And he said, bring me something or someone you suspect, And she identified the person who sent this letter. He was a young man from Rimini who was an assistant, and he probably was falling in love with Federico and wanted to stay with him. And Federico, was sent him away. Then, and he is one of the instrument player in Prova d'Orchestra. An important thing of Federico is in this Federico cinema, you take everything comes back. You don't shed anything. In the film, you find everything, and this is what I would like to people to understand, because that's why when they call me, I go not to be a critical reviewer of Fellini's cinema. If you come close to this genius, if you come close to Leonardo, you don't ask yourself whether you like the one painting over another. You have to know what happens, what is miraculous at that time, in that moment, because this person was able to give a view to the world that people would not have without him. If you don't understand that, you won't understand anything. And if you understand Federico, you have to go through Giulietta. This is the last message. So I would like you to read this book and tell other people to read the book. I don't want to get rich with this book, because this won't happen, because I would like people to know we had an absolute genius recognized all over the world, and we are forgetting him because we forget everything. This seems a special Italian trait.
Forse non è gelsomina.
Sorry, we couldn't translate the question, the remark, because it was not spoken on the microphone. The answer was maybe it was not Gelsomina. Thank you for your attention.